Okay, let's dive into the story of one of the most fascinating and, let's be honest, contradictory figures from the entire Peloponnesian War, the Spartan commander, Gylippus.
And right away, you see the massive contradiction, right? How could the guy who engineered one of Sparta's biggest wins ever also be the author of his own completely shameful downfall? His story is an absolute roller coaster of military genius and, well, personal greed.
So to really understand this guy, we have to start with where he came from in Spartan society. See, Gylippus wasn't your typical Spartan elite, and that outsider status, it's the key to pretty much everything about him, both his incredible rise and his spectacular fall.
He was what the Spartans called a mothax. What does that mean? Basically, an outsider. He wasn't born into that top-tier Spartan society. But, and this is a huge but, he still went through the agage, Sparta's legendary and absolutely brutal military training, right alongside the full citizens. So what you get is a guy with all the skills of a Spartan warrior, but none of the built-in status. You can almost feel that chip on his shoulder, right? That burning desire to prove himself, and maybe get rich while doing it.
And get this, there's another layer to it. His own father, Cleandridas, had been kicked out of Sparta for taking bribes. And who from? Athens, of all people. So just file that little detail away. It's going to come back in a really ironic, almost tragic way later on.
Okay, let's get to the main event, his absolutely legendary performance in Sicily. This was a huge deal. Athens had sent this massive invasion force to take over Syracuse, which was basically Sparta's worst nightmare come true. And Gylippus? He's the guy they sent in to clean up the mess.
Just look at this timeline for a second. When Gylippus finally shows up in the summer of 414 BC, things are, well, they're desperate. I mean, the Athenians are this close to walling off Syracuse completely and just starving them into submission. He is, and I mean this literally, their last hope.
And what does he do? His response was just genius. Bam! He immediately seizes the high ground. Then he gets everyone organized to build a counterwall, cutting the Athenians off at the knees. But he didn't stop there. He started coordinating land and sea attacks, which was super rare for a Spartan. And for the final move, he captures these key forts and traps the entire Athenian fleet in the harbor. I mean, come on, every single step was a tactical masterstroke.
And this is a perfect way to see the difference between him and his opponent, the Athenian commander Nicias. You couldn't have two more different leaders. Gylippus was all action, super proactive. Nicias, he was always hesitating, always on the defensive. When one of Gylippus's first attacks failed, what'd he do? He stood up in front of everyone, took the blame himself, got his troops fired up again, and they won the next day. Nicias, on the other hand, was always looking for excuses or waiting for a sign from the gods. Gylippus just ran circles around him.
But hey, you don't have to take my word for it. You want to know how big his impact was? The best proof comes straight from the enemy himself, in a desperate letter Nicias sent back home to Athens.
Nicias says it all, right here. The besiegers had become the besieged. Think about that. This one sentence from the enemy commander's own report confirms the complete reversal of fortune. Gylippus hadn't just stopped the Athenian siege, he had completely flipped the script.
So after this unbelievable victory, a victory that really put Sparta on the path to winning the whole war, Gylippus should have been set for life, right? A living legend. But, well, this is where the story takes that dark, tragic turn.
Okay, fast forward a few years to 404 BC. Athens has finally surrendered. Gylippus is given a mission that shows just how much trust people had in him. The top Spartan admiral, Lysander, tasks him with transporting a massive treasury of captured Athenian silver. We're talking 1,500 talents, a staggering fortune, back to Sparta.
And he just couldn't help himself. According to the historian Plutarch, Gylippus comes up with this plan that's both simple and incredibly bold. He secretly unstitches the bottoms of these sealed sacks of money, pulls out a whole bunch of silver for himself, and then just sews them back up, hoping no one would ever notice.
But of course, he got caught. When the Spartan authorities, the ephors, counted the treasure, the numbers just didn't add up. And the secret gets blown wide open by one of his own servants, who comes up with this brilliantly clever way to rat him out. He tells the ephors that many owls were roosting under Gylippus's roof. And of course, everyone knew what that meant. The famous Athenian coins, they had an owl stamped on them. The game was up. Gylippus fled into exile and died in disgrace.
So what are we supposed to make of this man? A military savant who gets taken down by his own simple greed. Let's try and piece together his legacy.
You know, the best way to really get a handle on Gylippus is to put him side by side with another famous Spartan outsider, the general Brasidas. They had a ton in common. Both were amazing commanders, both operated far from home, and both were great at diplomacy, not just brute force. But here's the massive difference, the thing that defines their legacies. Brasidas died a hero's death in battle. Gylippus died in exile, branded a common thief.
And it's really important to remember how we know all this. Our picture of Gylippus is basically a mashup of two totally different sources. You've got Thucydides, who is writing during the war. He gives us the military genius at Syracuse, but he says nothing about the theft. For that side of the story, we have to turn to Plutarch, who's writing like 500 years later and is much more interested in biography and moral character. You absolutely need both of them to see the whole messy picture of the man.
And that really brings us to our final question, the big takeaway here. Was Gylippus just one incredibly talented but deeply flawed guy? Or was his downfall a symptom of a much bigger problem? Was it a sign that the whole Spartan system, this rigid anti-money culture, just couldn't prepare its leaders for the kind of temptations they'd face out in the real world? It's a question that really gets to the very heart of the Spartan paradox.